It might be a toss-up between lightweight and bantamweight for the title of greatest division in the UFC, but even with that being the case, there is no doubt that the 155-pound weight class is the money division right now. And over the last few weeks we've watched as maybe 3 or 4 major prospects took major steps towards moving into the top 5, and with pretty much all of the ranked fighters now left without opponents, allow us here at MMA Dive to clear up this lightweight mess by matchmaking the entire top 15. Dan Hooker versus Jalen Turner. To kick things off, I must admit that I'm already getting cold feet in my new role as matchmaker. In an ideal world, fresh off of a first round TKO to Arnold Allen, Dan Hooker would take some rest, take an easier fight, and maybe float around the edge of the top 15 at his more natural home at 155 pounds, just so he could regroup. But this is a cruel game, and Dan Hooker is one game competitor, and I do think that he will likely be pushing to fight at his level, or to his ranking to be more specific. Jalen Turner is the man on the rise at the moment, a guy with real finishing ability. Finishing ability he showcased in a very quick stoppage of Brad Riddell, and for me this fight makes more sense than I hoped it would. Tony Ferguson versus Jim Miller. I know there are calls for Tony Ferguson to take on another ranked opponent, and even maybe serve as Conor McGregor's comeback fight. And though I do love the idea of him getting a huge payday and the exposure that would bring, if we're actually talking about what's best for El Cucuy, I think setting him up for a matchup against Jim Miller actually makes way more sense. Hell, they could even do it at 170 pounds if that works better. Miller just managed to take home the all-time UFC wins record with a finish of Donald Cerrone, and Tony, having lost each of his last 4 fights in pretty brutal fashion, needs an opponent who is more on Miller's level than McGregor's, even with all of the unknowns that surround the Irishman. Rafael dos Anjos versus Conor McGregor. Next up, even though he did just lose by way of TKO to Rafael Fiziev, Rafael dos Anjos did manage to make a good account of himself in spots, and though Fiziev will be the one to progress up the rankings, I do think that the real prize for RDA here will come in the form of a matchup against Conor McGregor. They have the history, they're both in similar positions relative to the top flight, and stylistically speaking, I think this would be a fitting challenge and a good placement fight with Conor's brand in mind. Need I say any more? Arman Tsarukyan versus Gregor Gillespie. Arman Tsarukyan may have lost last time around, but he came out of that thrilling battle with Matthias Gamrot with a much higher level of stock than he had coming in. And considering that he lost to Gamrot and lost to Islam Makhachev, and did fantastically well against both, it's pretty clear that this guy is headed somewhere, especially when you consider his age. He is still coming off of a loss though, and with that grey area in mind, why not set him up for a battle against Gregor Gillespie? If memory serves, Gillespie was in and around 8 or 9 in the rankings before he got removed for inactivity, and as an excellent wrestler in his own right, he would likely serve as a very interesting test for the rising star that is Tsarukyan. I actually do kind of love this fight, and if Tsarukyan is truly ready to progress into the top flight, a guy as tough and as driven as Gregor Gillespie could be an ideal matchup. On a quick side note, if you're enjoying this content and would like to stay up to date with all of our weekly uploads, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and once again, leave us a comment to let us know what type of content you'd like to see more of on this channel. We also have a Patreon account, so if you do want to help in supporting us, you can find the link in the description. Beneil Dariush versus Matthias Gamrot. I've been pretty high on Matthias Gamrot for years now, long before he actually joined the UFC, and to see him taking on another future great in Arman Tsarukyan was so much fun. Beneil Dariush has been one of the surprise packages of the last few years, a guy who seemed like he was destined for a career of relative obscurity, but then he turned it all around, going on a highly impressive run that culminated with a total shutout of the great Tony Ferguson. But that win needs to be followed up. And I do think that enough time has passed that Dariush has to now kind of look down the rankings rather than up. And I would argue that a win over someone like Gamrot would actually be even more impressive than beating the aging Ferguson. For Gamrot, a fight with Beneil would be an ideal step into the top 7 or top 8, and one that would likely open up the door to a marquee matchup next time around, if he can in fact get his hand raised. Justin Gaethje versus Rafael Fiziev. This one is just pure violence, and requires very little in the way of an explanation. Fiziev is a hammer, Gaethje is a hammer, and if these two are set up, it would be the perfect way to establish one of them moving forward. If Gaethje wins, he will be right on course for another huge fight, and if Fiziev wins, he'll clearly be knocking on the door of a title shot. So yeah, I think out of everyone within this top 10 who haven't actually fought each other yet, I think Gaethje versus Fiziev will likely deliver the most insane matchup of the lot. Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler. The idea of this fight has been floating around for a while now, and I could not be more in agreement with the idea of seeing Dustin Poirier and Michael Chandler throw down. For Poirier, hitting a wall once again in a championship fight must have been tough, himself, and from the way he was initially hinting that he wasn't as in love with the fight game, it seemed as though he was drifting away from a return. But as time has gone on, I'm sure he has realized just how much he can still accomplish, how much the fight game actually needs him. And in Michael Chandler, he has an opponent with some real weight behind his name, a guy who also poses pretty real danger if he's not careful. This fight would work as a major attraction on a pay-per-view, maybe not on the top spot, but slotted in as a co-main event, and the UFC could very easily just go with one single title fight, knowing full well that they would still have a blockbuster on their hands. Hell, they could even make it 5 rounds. Charles Oliveira versus Islam Makhachev. And finally we come to the obvious one, the title matchup between the champion who is not technically the champion but is very clearly still the champion, Charles Oliveira, and the rising phenom Islam Makhachev, who just seems like he is ready for this step up. I know a lot of people are really quick to give Islam grief for only really beating Dan Hooker and Bobby Green to get this shot, but we have seen fighters earning a crack at a belt for less, and all things considered, it's fine by me. For Oliveira, recapturing his belt would erase most of the confusion caused by the total mess that came from him being stripped in the first place, allowing him to effectively brush off the biggest threat to his championship reign, a guy in Islam who holds some pretty big name value on the back of his prowess, his mystique, and of course his ties to Khabib Nurmagomedov. So yeah, it's an obvious one, but I'm game. I'm totally game for this fight. But what did you make of our picks, and if you had any changes to make, what would they be? Do let us know your opinions in the comments section below, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and a comment before subscribing to the channel so you can stay up to date with all of our latest uploads. Thank you for watching.